taking you inside Nigeria Super Eagles camp ahead of their semi-final clash with South Africa's Bafana. And we chart the improbable path of the other semi-finalists, the part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the hosts, the Elephants of Ivory Coast, whose drama on the pitch has been backed by the country running so far a superb footballing spectacle. We have an incredible lineup of guests. That's all coming up in the Africa Football Showdown. You don't feel that vibe. I don't feel that vibe. Oh. Let's go. I'm Daniel Dadzie, and I'm joined by my co-host Mimi Fawaz in Abidjan. Mimi, how are we doing?
I'm doing very well, Daniel. Thank you very much. We've got a couple days rest now as we get ready for the semifinals on Wednesday.
Those Super Eagles, and especially the Ivorian national team as well. It must be crazy in that camp currently.
No, actually, I spent time in the Super Eagles camp just a couple days ago, and everybody's pretty relaxed, to be honest. We were watching the penalties, Cape Verde, Senegal. So that was interesting. And in terms of Ivory Coast, my goodness, the celebrations, I could see their match too. I was watching it with fans, and my God, they were all jumping up in celebrations. And yesterday when we were driving, we saw the Ivorian team were arriving back in Abidjan with their police convoy. And let me just tell you that their hotel is blocked off. Nobody can get close so that it can leave them to concentrate, which is fair enough for their big match on Wednesday.
I wish I was an Ivorian player now. I wish I was any football player, actually. Not just now.
Keep dreaming. It's always good.
We chart the improbable path of the other semi-finalists, the part of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the hosts, the Elephants of Ivory Coast, whose drama on the pitch has been backed by the country running so far a superb footballing spectacle. Joining us to talk about the AFCON today is Ahmed Shooble. He is a senior writer at Versus. He's been covering the tournament, and his recent articles have explored the themes that AFCON is proof that Africa does not need the rest of the world to thrive. And this is why underdogs succeed at the tournament. Ahmed, you're with us in London. How are you doing?
I'm good. Happy to be on, man.
Happy
Thanks for
to
inviting
have you. We also have Maher Mehazi. He's a sports journalist and he hosts the Africa Five-a-Side podcast. And he's just returned to Algiers from Abidjan, where he posted a podcast every single day with some of the best journalists covering the game. A man singularly devoted to African football. Maher is in Algiers. Hi, man.
Hey, thanks for the introduction. Very happy to be on with yourself, Mimi, and Ahmed.
I'm much happier. There's a lot of football knowledge on the podcast today. Now, I want to start today by just getting a sense from Ahmed and Maher. We've been discussing during the last episode that this AFCON has been more lucrative in terms of sponsorship prize money and has been spectacular on the pitch. You were there until yesterday. Does this tournament feel different? And are there conversations or things you saw covering this tournament that brought this home?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I felt too much of a difference in terms of the glamour or the glitz of the tournament. I think that's been pretty constant throughout the 4 tournaments for African Cup of Nations that I've covered. I would say where this one is very different and in a positive way is that we discovered a country in Cote d'Ivoire that it really is home to so many different communities and diasporas from West Africa. Being in Abidjan, you can see whole neighborhoods of Burkinabes, Senegalese, Guineans, Malians, and seeing all of those communities come together to celebrate this tournament, seeing them go to the stadiums and pack them out. I think that's what's made a really big difference is that you really felt like this is all of West Africa that's hosting this tournament, not just Cote d'Ivoire.
I feel you on that. I feel like it's one of the reasons why we've had such big turnouts as well. A lot of the well-performing teams are being clustered around Cote d'Ivoire, apart from, their neighbors to the east, Ghana, who crashed out at the very beginning. Ahmed, you've written about this tournament displaying an African spirit of self-reliance. That should make the rest of the world uncomfortable. Interesting thoughts there.
I'm not necessarily sure it would make the rest of the world uncomfortable. It's just that there have been a lot of cheap and sort of lazy narratives, especially from an outsider perspective. I'm covering this from London, looking at it from a European lens, so to speak. Like, I think what this tournament, this particular AFCON has done, it's slowly undoing those lazy narratives, like the poor quality of the football, the standard of the officiating, the general chaos that people associate with Africa, not just African football. And I think because, as we know, AFCON is just the great equalizer. Like, everybody starts at zero. It doesn't matter where your accolades, your club accolades come from. It doesn't matter what kind of competitions you played for. It doesn't matter about your prestige. When you come to this tournament, everybody starts at zero, and I think that's what makes the story so rich. What is looked at as a scourge by vast swathes of European football, Jurgen Klopp made some sarcastic comments. The Napoli president came out and said he wouldn't sign African players because of this tournament. And I think now we're starting to see a much more wider appreciation for it outside of the continent as well.
It's quite interesting that this conversation comes up at this time when we are talking about how this AFCON sort of redefines even quality wise. But my concern, Maher, and this is something we talked about last week, is how we maintain this. What does CAF do to sort of maintain this sort of quality? How do they even capitalize on the opportunity that this tournament has given them?
Well, the first thing they can do is they can make sure that the most deserving or the best qualified hosts actually get the tournaments. We had a period in between 2012 to 2017 where we had three tournaments go to two hosts, Equatorial Guinea and Gabon, who, with all due respect to them, probably weren't ready to host the tournament, especially Equatorial Guinea hosting it all by themselves in 2015. That's partly not their fault because of the Ebola crisis, but we had pitches being flown in Mongomo, for example, 2 weeks prior to the tournament starting. So actually having the right hosts, selecting them based on their actual bids, I think that's going to be 90% of the work. And the next one being in Morocco, I think we'll also have great organization, great stadiums, great everything. They know how to throw a football tournament. They know how to throw big events. So that's a big part of it. Other than that, I think CAF and FIFA, we like to harp on them a lot, but I think they're doing a good job helping out some of these smaller federations or smaller teams through programs like the FIFA Forward program. If we take a team like Mauritania qualified for three consecutive African Cup of Nations now. Prior to 10 years ago, they didn't have a national technical center or a federation headquarters. They didn't have a medical center that they do now for their athletes. So that all came through FIFA Forward funds. So the fact that
If I can just add to that briefly, sorry. I think it's also about leaning on what makes AFCON so unique and like amplifying that to a bigger audience, like the dramatic upsets we spoke about earlier, like the atmosphere in the stands, the passion, like the post-colonial pride that each nation has. Like it's like CAF has to find a way to market these niches to a wider audience, because I feel like there are a lot of people with this current edition who have woken up to African football, and it's important that they capitalize on that and give the people what they want, which is more.
Means it brings a lot of. I feel like it's a good build up for the African League that's coming up. 24 teams, 3 regions. All of this, it makes me feel like we can create a more sustainable domestic game. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, somebody asked me that as well. I think, as Maher has spoken about, we've looked at the FIFA Forward program. I think that's where you really look to build domestically and helping domestic leagues, because all the players that you see, for example, well, not all of them, but some of them come from the domestic leagues in Africa, and you can't have success in that sense if you're not investing from the grassroots up. So it's great to have the Africa Cup of Nations where you have some of the stars that are being introduced to the global audience, but you need to invest in those local leagues to bring around those new talents coming forward. Yes, there's the African Football League at the moment. It's was less teams this time around, but it needs to get bigger so that you can involve people playing more regularly for their clubs, and then help to grow the game. It's one of the ways I think that you can help to grow the game, but there also needs to be accountancy from FAs in terms of really investing both in the men's and the women's game.
The women's game, another very important one. There was an exciting tournament just a few months or is it weeks ago. But, when you talked about the domestic talent, I was reminded of Ghana's former president, who is now a presidential candidate, talking about, revamping the Black Stars after the poor performance in the AFCON. It's becoming quite political. guys, with the budgets being brought up, and it's not just Ghana. The ANC in South Africa would love Bafana to win. I know the opposition EFF has been very vocal about football.
Um, Macky Sall from Senegal just announced that he's going to be postponing elections indefinitely. The elections were supposed to happen on the 24th of February. And, in Senegal, just like in Burkina Faso and other countries like across West Africa, they have this really cool ceremony where before the team goes off to the African Cup of Nations, the president will come and hand them a flag, and he'll give them a speech, a motivating speech. They'll take the flag with them. They have to keep it with them the entire time. And whatever happens at the tournament, whether it's three consecutive losses and a group stage exit, or whether they win the entire thing, they have to go back and give the flag back to the president. And I just think about, would he have postponed these elections if instead of Senegal going home at the end of January, if they're going back on the 12th or 13th of February and handing that flag over as well? I don't know about that. I also think about, it is inherently political. Look, football in Africa in particular cannot exist without its governments. The federations are by and large, heavily reliant on subsidies from departments like the Ministry of Sport. So even a really good FA president like Fawzi Lakja, who's done a fantastic job with Morocco, he's a minister delegate in the Moroccan government. So, Morocco doesn't have a proper footballing strategy if they don't have a good political strategy behind it as well. So these things are inherently political. And of course, politicians are always going to try to surf on, good results of their national teams. And they're always going to try to distance themselves away from bad results. But I think that's pretty much a global phenomenon, I would say.
It's a bit weird because I look at it so I'm of Somali heritage. I'm from Somalia originally, but I grew up in the UK. It's a bit painful for me to not see Somalia at the AFCON, even though every other team feels like they're enjoying. All my Nigerian friends, my Ghanaian friends, my Ivorian friends, my Congolese friends. But no, it's still a bit of pride for me. But what I take most pride in is seeing the Diaspora players, the likes of Alex Iwobi, Ademola Lookman, Ola Aina. Like, they're having such a wonderful tournament. And I back that embrace wholeheartedly. I actually spoke with the CEO of the PFA, Mehazi Malongo, who's of Congolese descent himself, and he's been at the tournament himself, and he spoke about how important it is. It's actually like a proper initiative that they want more players who grew up in the EFL system, in the English football system, to go back home and represent whatever their country is. I think it's a really good sort of trend that we're starting to see. And I really like the idea of going back home and sort of demystifying Africa, as it were. I think that's a very powerful thing that this tournament's done as well.
Maher, do you think that moment is where we are at currently with,
I think Ahmed's touching upon very important points, and these points are particularly important, as he's pointed out a few times, from a European perspective. And you cannot have a really good African Cup of Nations without the European perspective because of, like he mentioned, so many players being from the diaspora, and us needing to publicize this tournament in all four corners of the world, but especially in Europe, where we know that football is a Eurocentric game at the moment, and that's really the heart of football. But really, these are, I think, talking points also. For I think European observers watching the African game. Me personally, like, I don't, as somebody that's been living on the continent for the last decade, I don't hear too many locals talk about demystifying Africa because they live here. There's nothing to demystify about it. But I do understand and appreciate his point, and I think it's very important to do that.
But Mimi, let's move it up on and take us into that Super Eagles camp once again. Now, you were telling us about that penalty shootout between South Africa and Cape Verde. Who did, from what you were seeing, who did Nigeria want to face out of the two teams?
So that's something I definitely cannot tell you. I do know, because different people told me what their opinions were, but I that's something I have to keep off the record. So I won't be able to tell you that. However, I can say that Nigeria's prepared, or they're preparing for whoever their opponent was going to be.
Yeah, but how was that experience like, sitting with all these stars? We haven't done it.
Oh, it was exciting. I mean, it was exciting because some of the players in Cape Verde play in France, and some of the Nigerian players play in France. So they were familiar with some of the players. So it's always interesting to hear when there's a player that they're familiar with, that they're saying, seeing taking a penalty.
Now, guys, Ahmed, I've stopped calling or trying to predict this tournament when Senegal lost to Ivory Coast. I think we've talked about how this is a tournament of surprises, but we still have to try and understand what the dynamics are going into a game like Nigeria v South Africa.
Yeah, of course, and you're wise to stop with the predictions because I have as well. Although, to be fair, it's not really much of a hot take. But before the tournament started, I had a sneaky feeling, and Mimi would like to hear this, but as well. But I thought Nigeria would go all the way from the beginning.
Oh, that's good.
So I'm still in a tournament of upsets. I'm still 1 for 1. But no, I it's even me. It's difficult for me to even back that out loud. This is the first time I vocalized that. I did it on my own podcast before, but yeah, I even in this game here, I'm thinking because we're so late into the tournament. Traditionally speaking, teams don't really like to go hammer and tongs. I know in the knockout rounds, Nigeria have been a little bit stronger than what we saw earlier on in the tournament. South Africa's defense has proven to be quite strong, as has Nigeria's defense. I'm thinking it will probably go stalemate in regular time, and then probably South Africa beyond extra time to penalties, and they'll win. I think South Africa will win.
Now there are two things that make me doubt this. Again, I'm not calling this, but Maher, hear me out. Nigeria haven't gone 90 minutes without scoring a goal in this tournament. And they have built a very solid back. I don't know if a stalemate into penalties or, even a goal line, a scoring draw will really cut it for this one.
It's a really interesting matchup in terms of a clash of styles. Look, Nigeria throughout this tournament, they've averaged 45% possession of the ball. They don't really want it too much. They're more comfortable sitting back in this 3-4-3 formation, which the coach Jose Peseiro really started using during this tournament. Prior to this, he was being criticized because he would stick with a 4-4-2, which often looked more like a 4-2-4 that was like sort of split horizontally and it looked really disjointed. And he switches to this 3-4-3 or 5-2-3, whatever you want to call it. And all of a sudden, Nigeria don't really want the ball. They're sitting back. They're defending very, very well. Players like Ola Aina, Trustekong have had great
And Calvin
tournaments.
Bassey as
And
well.
then when they get the ball, Calvin Bassey, oh my goodness, so good. But when they do get the ball, they're very vertical. And you just have to look at that goal against Angola. If you get caught out with players, not tracking back, and if they're out of position with 2 or 3 passes, Nigeria can get behind your defenders and they can create a goal scoring opportunity. Whereas South Africa, they're different. They do want the ball. I feel like they have averaged around 50% possession of the ball, and the thing with them, if you look at, for example, their match against Morocco, Morocco played similarly to how Nigeria should play this match, meaning Morocco, just like at the World Cup, they played that 4-1-4-1 formation, and they sort of sat back and they let South Africa have the ball, which is actually a strategy that I thought was probably a good idea because I thought Morocco out of possession are fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the goal that South Africa scored, Teboho Mokoena has all the time in the world. He's near the half line. And South African players did a great job of finding little half spaces in between the lines. And it was 4 touches, 5 or 6 seconds, and Evidence Makopa is all of a sudden on goal. And it was kind of a clumsy finish. It goes through the goalkeeper's legs, but he ends up scoring. And then Morocco have to panic. They throw everybody forward, and South Africa hit them on a counterattack. They win a free kick, and they score the second goal via a free kick. So it's an interesting clash of styles where South Africa are comfortable being on the ball, and because of their great team chemistry, because they have 8.5 players from Mamelodi Sundowns, they can break you down, very quickly with one-touch passing and combination passing and third man off the ball runs. But Nigeria also are very well set up to play against a team that has possession of the ball. So it's not about which style is better; it's about which team is going to execute their style of play better. So it's going to be a tough one to predict, but I think Nigeria might go through.
So you're calling it for Nigeria?
Yeah, look, Nigeria have been creating a lot of chances, even in their style of play. They have been creating a lot of chances. Victor Osimhen has created so many chances, and Jose Peseiro, the coach, he's used this analogy of the ketchup bottle. He says sometimes when you squeeze the ketchup bottle, just a little bit of ketchup comes out, and sometimes when you squeeze it, too much comes out. And he says we're doing the right things. We're squeezing the ketchup bottle, but just a little bit's coming out at the moment. But he feels like when Osimhen, for example, gets that first goal, maybe the floodgates will open and they'll start scoring 2-3 goals per game.
I don't know. We have just 2 games to go,
Yeah.
Mimi. I don't know if this is how it's gonna end. But An interesting point will be the fact that South Africa beat Nigeria in the Grammys last night when Tyler won Best African Music Performance over Davido and Burna Boy. So it's like
My
repeat
mind
or
is I'm staying on
revenge.
the
Mimi,
fence on
where's your
this
mind?
one. I was even stuck in the lift with a couple of people. I had, don't forget, DRC also playing the host Ivory Coast. There was somebody from Ivory Coast arguing with somebody from DRC, and then somebody from South Africa asked me my heritage. I said to him, I'm from Nigeria. He's like, we're going to beat you on Wednesday. And I had to remind him, well, we beat you in 2019 in the quarterfinals. And then I walked out the lift. So we just never know. So I'm just going to, I did tip Nigeria. Once we got through the group stages as one of the teams now, one of the favorites that I see going to the final, just because I think they've been steadily putting in the results. It hasn't been, as we said, scoring lots of goals, but it seems to me that of the three teams that are in semifinals, they haven't conceded very many goals. So if you look at DRC, if you look at Nigeria, if you look at South Africa, they haven't conceded that many goals. It's been a lot about their defense. So it's teams that have had very strong defenses who we're now seeing through to the semis.
Now let's talk about that fairy tale that has been Ivory Coast. They got through by the skin of their teeth again, Ahmed. Is the fairy tale continuing against DRC? It looks like they could pull it off.
I mean, looking at their squad, it even feels weird calling it a fairy tale, right? Like, this is a very, very, very stacked team we're talking about. On paper, before a ball was kicked, I'd say probably the strongest squad in the entire tournament. But you would be a little bit foolish to rule them out at this stage. I'm reminded of, particularly in that last game against Mali, like I'm reminded of just, if you're a fan of wrestling, WWE, WWF, The Undertaker, there's this one lasting image I have of him where his hand just raises from the dirt after he's been buried. Like that is what Ivory Coast is at this tournament. As fun as DRC have been to watch in this tournament, I wouldn't want to see them go home. I think they deserve as good as they've got this tournament, but I can't rule out. I've ruled out Ivory Coast too many times, like 3 times maybe in this tournament.
I haven't. I've been really good with mine. I've not ruled them out at all. So I've actually been doing really well with them.
I'm gonna follow Mimi. I'm gonna stick with them. I'm gonna say Ivory Coast to win that one.
I'll say this, but I mean, at this point, no one is going home anyway. So if you
look at it this way. One of my very close Congolese friends, he said to me, even called me specifically today to tell me that he'd predicted since they finished the group stages that DRC were going to be in the final. I said, well, wait and see come Wednesday.
It's a very convenient prediction to make if you're Congolese. I mean, let's face it. Let's face it. I predicted Ghana would go far. Let's face it. but Maher, I can't forget the fact that the first game they won was their last game, and then they won with 3 goals after drawing so many times. It seems like they've been doing just what they need to do, and they've been grinding results. The question is, would it be enough against the host nation that has already steamrolled through Senegal?
I think it should be. Look, DR Congo, even though they didn't win in the group stages, I thought they played well enough to win some of their matches. And even, throughout this last calendar year, 2023, they've been absolutely on fire. They were one of the men's national teams of the year nominations for the CAF Awards just because they got so hot. They weren't even supposed to be at this tournament the way their qualifying campaign was going. And then they hired Sebastian de Sabre halfway through, and with him, they've been nonstop winning. I think they might have only lost 1 match since then. And what they do a really good job of, they line up in like a 4-2-3-1. Since Cameroon was eliminated from this tournament, they are now the team that crosses the ball the most. And Arthur Mesuaku in particular, he's the player that has the most total crosses in this tournament. And Elia Meshak on the right wing does something similar as well. So they're a very direct team, even though when they have possession of the ball, they like to play on the ground forward, and then they get to the wings and they tend to put in these crosses. But they defend very well as we've all mentioned. So they're going to be a tough task for Cote d'Ivoire. Absolutely. I think this is another match that could be 50-50. But I'm not really surprised by them doing this well. I would be surprised if they beat Cote d'Ivoire just because of the immaterial, intangible factors of hosting a tournament and having that crowd behind you. And Cote d'Ivoire surfing on the fact that like Mimi said, or like Ahmed said, sorry, they seem invincible at the moment. So
I
that's the
did
only
say
thing
it,
that
not
really
on here, but I
has
said it.
me.
I
That's the
said
only
it.
thing that has me leaning Cote d'Ivoire is that they're a zombie team. They can't be killed.
I said that, yeah.
So if I'm listening to you guys, then we are having a Nigeria Cote d'Ivoire
Well,
final.
many Ivorians that I
I'm
spoke to
listening
on
to
here
you
said that that's what they see in the final. Well, not that they would like to see in the final.
For those that bet as well, I think that's the betting favorite.
It will definitely be an exciting match.
This is also South Africa versus Nigeria. For those that don't know, is a very r- heated rivalry, fun but heated. When Nigeria were at their golden era in the 90s, they had won the 94 African Cup of Nations, and then they were expected to win the 96 Cup of Nations. Remember, they won the 96 Summer Olympic football tournament. They won a gold medal there. But because of some political issues, there was an activist in Nigeria that was he got the death penalty by Nigeria's military regime at the time. As a result, Nelson Mandela spoke out, and South Africa sort of refused to send a team to the 96 Cup of Nations, which was being held in South Africa, which South Africa subsequently won. But if you speak to any Nigerian, they said, if we were there, we for sure would have beat you. And so that really sparked a interesting football rivalry that continues to this day.
Mimi and I, we can do this for 24 hours. But we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you very, very much, Ahmed Shooble, for joining us. And, of course, Maher Mehazi is an absolute pleasure. Mimi, as always, we'll be back on Thursday we'll be back for our next recording to see where everyone's smoothness level is. But this has been the Africa Football Showdown. Many thanks to all of our partner stations who broadcast this on radio in Ghana, in Nigeria, and in Liberia, in Zambia, all other countries in the continent. Remember, you can listen to us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcasts, or you can watch us on YouTube. We'll be back with another exciting episode of the Africa Football Showdown, and I promise you, okay, let me not promise, but I am saying that Peter Okoche will be back. He will be back. He hasn't abandoned us. Catch you next time. You don't feel that vibe. I don't feel that vibe. Oh.